The Georgia Bulldogs are back-to-back defending national champions. But what if I told you if this offense was going to be one of the scariest that Georgia has had in the Kirby Smart era? And it's largely in part because Georgia has never had a wide receiving core, the receiving weapons that it has this year. Georgia is so deep in terms of receivers, tight ends, guys that can catch the football and make plays down the field. Today on Southeastern 14, we're going to break it down and tell you why SEC defenses better look out for Georgia through the air in 2023. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Southeastern 14. I am Blayne Gilmer. Cover SEC football here for Southeastern 14. Chris Lee, Blake Level, they'll be joining me as well here pretty soon as we get cranked up our football coverage. They've been holding it down with baseball and basketball throughout the last few months, but we are about to do a full-scale ramp-up of college football, SEC football coverage here on Southeastern 14. So if you like the content, like, subscribe, turn on notifications. We would greatly appreciate that. Going to start doing some live stream content on Sunday nights. But as for this video, we're talking about the Georgia wide receiving core. And I include tight ends in that because Georgia has a plethora of weapons when it comes to the 2023 season. And Carson Beck is hadn't officially been named the starter, but I think everybody who watched spring ball could see that Carson Beck is going to be that guy, 6'4", 215 pounds, can really get the football down the field, has a big arm, has been there. This is his fourth year in the program. So I think Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart and company are going to feel pretty comfortable with him at the helm. And listen, all he's got to do is just not force it and go through his reads and find the open guy because somebody's going to be open. There are a ton of weapons returning. Georgia has went out in the transfer portal and added 2 weapons, SEC guys that have, went out and had production before at other SEC schools. So it is going to be something to behold when it comes to this Georgia receiving core. And like I said, I do count Brock Bowers and also another couple tight ends for Georgia in there because they're used as wide receivers. They'll split them out. They'll put them in the slot. They'll do different things. And Brock Bowers has led Georgia in receiving in the last 2 years. So we're going to have to dig through this, but you can see right there on the title page here on this graphics that we have is that Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, he's a senior. He kind of is going to be that leader, that guy that comes out and just does the right things. He had a big catch against Tennessee last year. Yet he hasn't been, overly productive in terms of yards and things like that. I mean, he had 337 yards receiving last year, had that big touchdown catch, but he's a chain mover. He's a guy that in key downs, he goes and he finds the sticks and he's able to make catches over the middle, do things like that. And he brings that toughness, that leadership. So Kirby Smart has a leader there in Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint that he can count on. And, of course, McConkey has been one of the more explosive players in the SEC over the last 2 years. People time and time again underestimate him, and he comes out and just torches defenses. Had a big game, of course, a big touchdown catch against Tennessee last year. He went off against Auburn a couple years ago, had a big game, of course, in the national championship. Just time and time again, McConkey coming through, making plays, had a big catch against Ohio State down in the red zone. So McConkey is a guy that you got to look out for. Arian Smith there in the middle, he's a guy that is maybe the fastest player in all of college football. He's a guy that's a 10-1 in the 100-meter on track and field. Legitimately, if he dedicated all his time to that, he could be a guy that runs at the Olympic level in track and field. But he's a guy that had the huge catch against Ohio State that brought Georgia back to help them springboard to that victory in the Peach Bowl, the 70-something yard touchdown that Stetson Bennett found him on. So those 3 guys are kind of the top 3 receivers, actually wide receivers that are returning that you see on the screen there. And then, of course, they've added Rara Thomas and Dominic Lovett. But let's talk about what they have returning. 2,667 receiving yards are returning for Georgia in 2023. That is 60.3% of its receiving production. And that includes them, losing Darnell Washington. That includes them losing guys like Kyrus Jackson and Dominic Blaylock. Kenny McIntosh had 505 receiving yards last year, was one of their more productive guys out of the backfield. They'll be looking to see who can kind of do that out of the backfield for him this year. Brock Bowers, he had 942 yards receiving last year. That is third all-time single season, because Georgia's only had one guy ever break 1,000 yards. That's Terrence Edwards. Tavares King was right there behind him with 950-something yards. And then you got Brock here with 942. So he's just a weapon. He's going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft next year. You can align him at so many different places. He's a mismatch on a corner. He's a mismatch on a safety or a linebacker. So Georgia and Mike Bobo, of course, will move him around a lot. We've already talked about Lad McConkey, just the experience. He can line up outside at the Z, and he not only is a guy who can run the intermediate route, leave people kind of lost with how quick he is at the top of routes and things like that. But he has the straight line speed, a true 4.40 guy that can just go down the field and absolutely burn you. Like I already talked about, Rosemy-Jacksaint, talked about Arian Smith. These are all guys that have the catches, have the experience. And if they stay healthy, especially Arian Smith, Georgia is so different when Arian Smith is on that field, because you've got a guy literally that defenses have to account for. This is a guy that at any time can go out and score from anywhere, because he's so fast, and you have to account for him taking the top off the defense. Just for reference, he's not been healthy very much in his career. Okay. Last year was his healthiest, but still, Georgia was a little bit different offensively. They had different things going, using those big tight ends, all that kind of stuff. He has 12 catches on his career, 4 of which have gone 4 touchdowns. So at a pretty high rate, Arian Smith is scoring. And if he can stay healthy, then Georgia has tremendous options in terms of guys returning. They also returned some guys who didn't play a lot last year, but have a year in the program or a couple years in the program. Guys like Jackson Meeks, 6'2", 205, a junior that's been around, can contribute. Denalon Morrisette was a freshman last year. He should be able to add some depth there. And then Dillon Bell. Dillon Bell was actually a guy that was very productive for Georgia as a freshman. Made some key catches. He's 6'1", 210. He could even line up in the backfield if he needed to. He's that kind of versatile of a guy. Actually played a lot of running back in high school. So a lot of options there out of the guys that are truly returning to the roster. And then they add Dominic Lovett and Rara Thomas. I don't think you can overstate the impact that is going to be felt by these 2 guys coming in. You're talking about 2 top tier guys for other SEC programs. Dominic Lovett from Missouri and Rara Thomas. They had combined had 1,472 yards last year and 14 touchdowns for Mizzou and Mississippi State. And, Rara Thomas gives you a guy that can compete at that X position and be right there with Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint coming out of the gate. He's still got to make sure he gets caught up on everything, and there'll be time for that during the summer. But Dominic Lovett is a guy that there's been nothing but tremendous reports on. He is one of the most dynamic guys, probably the most dynamic guys that Georgia has had in the slot position since guys like Isaiah McKenzie, who's still in the NFL, Miko Hardman, who's still in the NFL. These are guys that Georgia just hasn't had a a ton of in terms of dynamic slot guys that can create after the catch, and Dominic Lovett can for sure do that. So these may be two of the bigger additions in all of college football, but just because the talent at Georgia is what it is, and the surrounding levels of it that go throughout that roster, sometimes I don't even think people are paying as much of attention. Georgia didn't really feature him in the spring game. So Dominic Lovett is going to be a guy that turns heads, and I mean, he could end up being Georgia's leading receiver this year. He's that kind of player, and what he can do after the catch. Both of these guys, they could contribute in the return game if Kirby decided to put them back there as well. So both have done that in the past as well. So huge additions for Georgia. Carson Beck, the Georgia quarterback room, should be extremely excited about that. And then ZEED Haynes and Lawson Luckie. These are two guys that I think as a freshman, you talk about, okay, who could come in and be that new face that helps and contributes early. Well, Yazeed Haynes has a lot of Adonai Mitchell in him. And yes, Adonai Mitchell is a guy who left and went to Texas, right? But he only played in 3 games last year. Adonai Mitchell did for Georgia. An important game, with that being in Ohio State, how he played in that game and the catch he had at the end. And of course, he's had 2 monster catches for Georgia over the last 2 years. So replacing Adonai Mitchell, nothing easy, but people in and around the program have compared ZEED Haynes to an Adonai Mitchell type player, a guy that can win at the top of the route, create separation, made a nice back shoulder catch in the spring game. ZEED Haynes is a guy, a true 4.3 40 guy that can he's just explosive. And he's from Pennsylvania. Comes down, had a great bowl practice. He enrolled early and has really kind of endeared himself already to that coaching staff, to his teammates. He's a guy that could contribute on the outside. And then Lawson Luckie was the talk of spring ball. Another monster tight end. People calling him Baby Bowers, all that kind of stuff. Making huge catches at a 60-something yard touchdown catch in a scrimmage that they had over there. Lawson Luckie is, he played at the highest classification in Georgia high school football. He will not be daunted by this and has already shown in the spring that he can compete at this level. And I didn't even mention at this point, they return Oscar Delp, a 6'5", 225-pound tight end that Lawson Luckie is going to be competing for that second tight end spot with. So Georgia is absolutely loaded when it comes to the receiving core, and I count those tight ends in there because Georgia uses them in such a versatile way and uses them so much in this passing game. I think that as open as it was under Mike Bobo, now with Carson Beck at the helm, a very naturally gifted passer of the football, Georgia's got a lot returned on the offensive line to protect. The running back group maybe isn't as strong as it's been in the past for Georgia. I think you're going to see even a more open offense. Guys like Dominic Lovett, Rara Thomas being added to that key group of Lad McConkey, of Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, and of course those tight ends, Arian Smith. It goes on and on. There's guys we haven't even mentioned on here, guys that are 4.3 guys like Cole Speer, who will provide depth. He's a guy who will be a sophomore, hasn't got to play much yet. Of course, CJ Smith and Anthony Evans, both guys that run 4.2 in the 100-meter, yet to play much for Georgia. Tyler Williams, a big 6'3", 205 freshman from Lakeland, Florida. The depth knows no ends when it comes to Georgia's receiving core. Can Mike Bobo and company efficiently get it to those weapons? Can Carson Beck do so and take care of the football? If he does, you're looking at another monster year for this Georgia offense, and a very, very good reason why Georgia has a realistic shot at and is the Vegas favorite to three-peat for the national championship. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications. I am Blayne Gilmer for Southeastern 14. We'll catch you guys next time.